Hi people, this is a picture of my mother on the left, and that's my coach, Sir Roy Blackman, and he's gone to pick up an award from the Queen, and my mum's gone with him. She was a good friend of his. She introduced me to him at the age of 8 years old as a way to reduce my problems in life. Where basically he was my rehabilitation coach from 8 to 26 years old. He was brought into my life because I faced extreme bullying. I was a person with special education needs. He was my academic coach. He was my business coach and invested in my projects over many years. He was a gentleman who actually originally was studying to be a doctor. Then he did social sciences and he became a nurse, became a high-level nurse in a hospital. But he didn't have the funds to continue on to be a doctor, and which was a shame. Very meticulous man. Anyway, cut long story short, this person on the left is my mother, and this person on the right is Mr. Blackman, and my mum's called Anne. Now, my mother was very much instrumental in teaching her children about stress management. My mum was very athletic. My mum was a person who never had the opportunity to be involved in education. My mum has been involved in education, lifelong learning, since I've known her since the 60s till now. My mum is involved in the arts. My mum was involved in design. She still goes to college. My mum does Qigong. This will be probably about a 10th year my mum's been doing Qigong. She goes to Keep Fit. She does quite a lot of activities, and she encouraged her children to be involved in activities. Why that came really about was because my mum was a sickly child. She was very sickly, my mother, and she never had the opportunity to go to school. So when she had her children, the first thing what a mother wants to do is wants their children to be strong, want them to be courageous. They want them to have the opportunity to have education, the best opportunities. And my mum always believed that education is a passport to the world, as well as manners. That's what she always used to tell us. Anyway, it was important for me to share this information with you today because I talked a lot about my father. It's a tribute to my mother. My mother's still alive, and she plays a great part in my life. I'm very much like her as a person. And she's very much a person who gives back to the community, very much likes to get herself involved in activities and development, gives a lot of her time to the church. She's an individual that encouraged us to network with wider cultures and within our own culture. She's very much into a culture. My mum's Grenadian, my dad's Jamaican. The gentleman on the left, Mr. Blackman's Ghanaian. Both of these individuals really empowered me to believe that, guess what? Don't let disadvantages be a barrier to achievement. My teacher here on the right told me I could go to university when people told me I could never go to university. He said, always push the boundaries of your learning, because what's happening, you're facing barriers. Mr. Blackman understood what it's like to be an African diaspora person in Britain. He knew that we had barriers to entry to do what we wanted to do. And we had been defocused in our educational system because he was a teacher. He ended up with a master's in education. It was him I studied under. I was an individual, I did journals basically from the time 8 years old to the time he left this planet in 1996. And he was an individual that did the evaluation for me. I used to do journals about my social, physical, intellectual, cultural, emotional, spiritual development. Where that started from, that's called SPICES. Early learning. The child has to learn socially, physically, intellectually, culturally, emotionally, spiritually. He taught me about Maslow. Everything to do with early learning, educational systems. Mr. Blackman taught me. He taught me a lot about education, looking at images, etc., etc. He was involved in the arts himself. He was in sports. He was in photography. He taught me things about photography. He taught me things about sports. He taught me things about music. He taught me things about organizing, managing, administration, as well as my father. And who was instrumental in making that happen was my mother. My mother, who met him, she was doing English as a second language, and I used to go to his classes as a child. It's quite ironic. And as a child, I've seen him do many things. He's a great man, and today I'm only giving you a sort of periphery that this person is an icon in my life, is a legend. And most important, the number one icon in my life is my mother. Like I said, she's alive and kicking. Thank God, that's most beautiful. And she's been an individual, been instrumental in my life, and wanted people to know that she still plays a great part in my life. In the work that I do now is basically I use the arts in a wide range of ways, and one of them is to reduce people's stress. That whole idea, I was taught about stress by her and the gentleman on the left, on the right, Mr. Blackman, because what happened, most ordinary people are not taught about stress, and how stress can lead to chronic emotional stress, to most post-traumatic stress. And what big was in the African Caribbean community was stress that led to chronic emotional stress, because they faced inequalities in health. They were not told in the Caribbean about stress, because the society at large, racism, the colonialization and racism increased stress so they could make other people pliable. They never educated people on stress. When parents, relatives came here in the 50s, there was overwhelming stresses created socially, physically, intellectually, culturally, emotionally, spiritually. The first one was housing, that people couldn't get a house in the slums. So it said on doorways when they went to get a house, it said no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. So imagine if you can't get a house in the slum, what type of stress that you face, and you got your family with you. I want you to think about that for a moment. So my parents and my mother here, and the gentleman on the right, they introduced me to stress, and I started to introduce that to individuals, because the arts reduce my stress, sports reduce my stress, certain activities, cultural activities reduce my stress, and I did it proactively for that. When I felt stressed, I dance. That's the number one activity because it's free. I freestyle dance. And when I looked into my life at university, when they asked me as a leader, what do you do in regards to your stress management? Well, the number one activity I involved myself in is UK jazz dancing, social, African Caribbean social dancing is number one. I involve myself in activities and giving back to my community. And that's generally the arts, because people ask me to use my professional skills, which I do. When I go away to college, and I've been away to university and college, I come back into the community and create some type of program for me to pass on my learning, my skills, as Mr. Blackman did, to the next generation, so their stress can be reduced. Think about what's the number one stress that people have. The number one stress they have is miseducation. The number one stress is miseducation. So imagine the number of people got no qualifications. That meant they had to do dead-end jobs. Do you understand? My parents didn't have an education, so they had to do dead-end jobs. It's important for people to understand. And that created stress because people weren't getting much money for that. In Britain, you have to understand, educational attainment goes with educational wealth. If you haven't got qualifications, well, you're not going to get a job. That's going to give you wealth. You understand? It's important for people to understand. Anyway, Blue UK Jazz Dancers, giving you insight. On the left is my mother.